What's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of pldViews on the PLD Projects YouTube channel. My name is PLD, and I'm excited to be here. And that was my phone knocking down. Now it's that great sound. We're off to a great start already. I do want to apologize for not making it last week. I missed an episode because it was just, a lot of things happen. Sometimes real life happens. Also, the commitments to other channels I work on as well. Just never seemed to be a good time to perfectly find a place to film this episode covering this particular part in the series. If you don't know why you're here, I am here to talk about my favorite 1980s TV sci-fi franchise called V. They did a mini-series in the 80s. They followed up with a weekly series, which is much more of a guilty pleasure weekly series, and that's where we are now. Covering books, comics, the reboot they did in 2009, any news we get about a possible remake or reboot or something to that effect, basically something new. We do know Kenneth Johnson, the original creator of the saga, is working on bringing it to the silver screen. Hopefully that will happen sooner rather than later, although I'm sure right now it's by the back burner of some people's minds anyway, regardless. But you know what? Before we get into that, I'll have some announcements at the end of this show about the channel, about what's upcoming. But for right now, let's just go break right back into this week's episode. We're covering the 5th episode of the weekly series. It's called The Sanction, written by Brian Taggart, directed by Bruce Seth Green, originally aired on November 16th, 1984. And this was a good episode. It's a pretty good episode overall. I will say that's definitely... it's already starting to fall into a little bit of that guilty pleasure syndrome a little bit. It's not quite the same feel as the miniseries. Definitely at this point it's getting further and further away from the terror that was involved in the first miniseries, away from the big action piece of the second miniseries. Now it's more of a little bit of a soap opera with laser guns, so to speak, but it's not quite as bad as it gets when we get to the incident, which is what I call the incident happens around episode 12. Possibly 13, I have to check that, where all hell breaks loose because of major budgetary slashing that caused the end of the world as far as V went at the time. But this one was still pretty good. It had some different antics into it, which made it a little bit off kilter, I would say, a little bit funny in ways that maybe it shouldn't be. But if you go with it, you could have a great time. Basically, the idea is we started off with, again, Howard K. Smith, the news reporter. We're going to talk about him later on. He's the character from the character database that I'm going to mention after the review is over. Howard K. Smith is a news reporter of the time, and like I said last time, he's been starting to start the episodes with these great little segments from around the world. They have nothing to do with the story. Nothing to do with any of the stories you're going to read or see anything about. It's totally different. It's just this little interesting segment from the World Liberation Front in New York, World Liberation Network, and they talk about little pockets of resistance that's happening all over the country. This week it included Paul Savage leading a band of fighters in Arizona, but the Freedom Network Medal of Valor was awarded to an Anna Horowitz in South Carolina, who led the Gray Panthers to rewire 15 Skyfighter disrupting attacks. Now, again, I said it before, but I love this. I really love this. It's like stupid little segment that really doesn't mean anything the story-wise, but it adds such a little depth to the show in just a little small way. I don't know how you can't not like it, really. It's a lot of fun. But then we get into the episode proper. We got two basic storylines. There's a storyline A, storyline B. The first storyline involves Donovan. Of course, Donovan and his son. Sean is being held by the visitors, as we know from last episode. Who was instrumental in helping Diana, unfortunately, because he's still converted, and they're using drugs to control his mind. Well, that continues, but this time, this is where the situation starts getting a little weird. We actually get a V Kung Fu master, a lizard Kung Fu master, or karate master. That's called Ray Vok, of course, something different. But the funniest part about it is that really, you think about the time frame. This is 1980s. 1985 to be precise. And there he is. His name is Klaus. Klaus, I guess he's the German visitor who is teaching the young kids there. The one there on the far right, Sean Donovan, just knocked out one of the other students. But Klaus, basically, I guess it's the 1980s. What's going bigger on this time? The Karate Kid. And this couldn't be any more of a ripoff if it wasn't played by Marty Cove himself. But it's a lot of fun seeing him seeing Klaus teaching the aliens, and he's a very badass. They do have a badass introduction of him where he kills a visitor trainee to introduce him, and that's part of the first storyline. The other storyline that we get into as far as revolves around Elizabeth again. Elizabeth, that's a very timely storyline. Elizabeth is tired of being basically quarantined ever since she got to the Club Creole, which is serving as the de facto resistance base. Elias's restaurant. Elias, the resistance owner who owns the restaurant. She wants to get out. She wants to get out in the town, at least see something, at least get some fresh air. She's been kept inside because of the threat of the visitors searching for her. But Julie just basically blows her off. And who comes to the rescue? Kyle Bates. Kyle, the young hot stud motorcycle driver, of course. They have a crush on each other. That weird crush I talk about, where we have the 20-year-old kid, 20-year-old guy getting what's technically speaking maybe 2-year-old girl and a 17-year-old body, possibly. It's kind of weird. Gotta go with it. It is sci-fi. Gotta go with it though. They do get out. It's pretty cool. They get to go around the town, around the surrounding areas of Los Angeles. They do get into some trouble, of course. Elizabeth sees Robin, her mother, who has been looking for each other for the last couple episodes, although Robin seems to be looking a lot less than Elizabeth is. Elizabeth sees her. Robin doesn't. Gets into some trouble, uses her powers, gets herself known. That becomes known because now not only does Diana start knowing about it, Nathan Bates starts knowing that she's not quite the 8-year-old girl they thought they were looking for. So it's definitely makes damage for her as far as her spot in the resistance. There's some more fighting there going on. Going back to the other storyline, Donovan breaks into the legation despite against Ham Tyler's wishes. Ham Tyler says Klaus trained killer. Donovan says he doesn't care. Of course, he wants his son back. Where they get all the information that Sean's with him, it's hard to tell, but they do. Donovan breaks it in the stupidest way. Again, one of those moments where I'm like, really? That's where we're going with her. He takes he just drives her up right to the legation with a box of mice and bribes the guard with a mouse. Yes, it's basically the equivalent of driving up to a marine or military facility and bribing the guard with a candy bar. maybe a fine steak, if nothing else. But either way, it's pretty ridiculous, to be honest with you. You got to go with it. You got to let some of these things go at this point. You got to realize this is a lot sillier than this miniseries was. This never would have happened in the miniseries. But so he gets in there, he grabs Sean. He's able to escape with Sean. But not before Klaus sees him. Diana sends Klaus after him. There's this big motorcycle fight chasing the big van. And that's another thing that gets me every single time we have V motorcycles. They're all like V symbols, V helmets. It's like they're aliens, but they're using human technology, but they're painted and everything to look like V's. It's very silly still, but again, you got to go with it. You got to go with it if you're going to have any fun with it. And I do have fun with this episode, like I said. And also the introduction of the new character called Mr. Chang, who basically replaces the guy Roller from the first couple episodes. He adds Nathan Bates's his right-hand man, his security, his top muscle, pretty much, so to speak. He gets to be placed in charge of finding Kyle and finding Elizabeth. And that's exactly, like I said, how Nathan Bates discovers that Elizabeth is no longer 8 years old looking, but possibly 16 or 17. And also that she's being seen with his son. So Donovan, going back to Donovan makes it back to a safe house. Klaus finds him. Donovan and him fight, like we mentioned. That's where this fight comes in. The picture here, they're fighting at the safe house. Donovan. Best part of that if you see what's in his hand or what's in Klaus's hand there, it's not really a hand at all. He basically took his hand off and puts us a laser whip on. It starts humming. He starts cracking it. Lightning bolts come off. It's a pretty cheap looking thing. Theoretically, I guess on paper it sounds good. You're trying to save time and energy the way you can. That's the way you do it. I guess you got to make it unique. At least it's unique. It's kind of fun that way, I guess, to see that. But it's a good episode. It's a good fight sequence. Donovan able to make it away, but he runs into him again a couple more times. Kind of hit and miss a few times. He's trying to get back into town. Sean, meanwhile, had run back away. It's picked up by Ham Tyler briefly, but then Sean gets away again because Sean's converted one. He's converted, convinced that Klaus is the way, Klaus is the master. It's a good moment between Donovan and Sean as Sean's trying to see him kind of break through a little bit, but not enough. And Donovan's really trying to break through the kid, not getting it. But going back to Club Creole, where Robin finally finds resistance, but of course Elizabeth's not there. So it's a case of who's going to find who first. at that point. I saw some cheesy moments there. That storyline's okay, it's not too bad, but either way, we get back to Donovan trying to go back to the legation one more time to get Sean out again, and Ham agrees after finding him. And he says he'll help him out, but this time he's going to have to go do it his way, which I like. I love the chemistry between Ham and Donovan. Still is top notch, no matter what's going on. These guys together make a good team. In a way, some people would argue that Chris Faber, who was Ham's partner in the original miniseries, not the original miniseries, I'm sorry, during the final battle, because that's when they first appeared in the final battle, was a much better, but Chris didn't make it to the series. And when Chris does come back a little bit later, it kind of takes away from the Donovan and Ham camaraderie. So Donovan and Ham do make it in. They find Sean again, but Klaus is there waiting for him. The final battle with Klaus, and it's Donovan fighting the martial arts master. Laser Whip comes, attacks him. He opens an electric box, and electrocutes the bad guy. But then Sean takes up Donovan's gun, aims at him, can't quite do it. So he runs away. But Cat Mouser and Dinah finds him. Dinah and Donovan stare down against the wallway. Sean chooses to go with Diana at this point. You figure this is going to come back into play, right? At some point, you figure that. Yeah, well, no, it doesn't. This is the last time we actually see Sean. I know the series does get canceled at the end of one season, so perhaps they were planning at some point to return. But unfortunately, in this case, it's one of those dangling plot lines that never really get developed at the end of the series when we end up Sean. We don't even know where Sean is. I haven't heard from Sean. At one point, there's one mention of Sean after this at all, pretty much. If I remember correctly, I'll find out. The other part of it, of course, Elizabeth finally does make it home after Kyle discovers all he needs to know that he discovered that she's 2 years old, basically. And it's scarily enough, he doesn't seem to be too put off by that. He's still going to kiss her, still going to go for her, still going to date her. I don't know about you. If I discovered that this 17 or 18-year-old girl that I was dating as like a 20-year-old was actually 2 years old and a 17-year-old body, that might make me put on the brakes. Might make me go, hey, let's see where this is going here. But no, he seems all in. What are you going to do about that? Again, 80s sci-fi. What are you going to do? It's a little problematic at times. But that's where we end up at the end of the episode. It's a fun episode. Donovan, it's got some action pieces in it. Donovan and Klaus's fights are well done. Mark Singer does this great example of overacting. He does. I say overacting. I don't mean it in a bad way, though. It's almost like William Shatner-esque in a way. It's not great, like performing. I don't go, wow, this is an amazing actor, but it's fun the way he does it. There's this whole like big thing where he has to go into the legation. He's like diving over hedges. He's making big deals about things. He goes up against the wall, sees like a little lion head on the wall, freaks out. It's all funny. It's all fun games. It's fun. That's all I can put it. It's fun. It is a step down, still a step down from the weekly, from the miniseries, like I've said before. But there's some great moments. There's some great moments at this point. It's a guilty pleasure, but I like it. So I'd give it probably about a B minus, maybe maybe C plus B minus, probably B minus because I did have fun with it. And that's where we end that before we go into episode 6 next week. Before we end this episode, we go to the next thing we're going to do. I'll go my little bit of a character database function here. I always do that. The first one I'm going to talk about this time is Howard K. Smith. Like I mentioned before, Howard K. Smith is an actual newscaster from the 80s and probably before, actually 70s as well. He made his first appearance in the original miniseries. He basically was this great head that newscaster head that was able to just give elegance to the show, give a sense of credibility to the show. It's an actual newscaster giving news stories. And like I said, I really dug what they had him doing. They had him giving this tales of anthology tales, almost like I want to see more episodes about what happened elsewhere besides our favorite people, our favorite heroes, our cast of characters. It'd be cool to see anthology. Each season could have been done like if this is done nowadays. You could do like a totally anthology. This episode takes place in LA. This episode takes place in Texas. This one takes in Florida, or at least do a season that way. You can see different resistances around the world, or at least around the country. Kind of cool to see. But he appears like in the first episode. The original miniseries. He comes back in about the third episode, and then the fifth episode he comes on for a while until budgetary slashing. That's one of the things they cut, and rightfully so. If I had to cut something budgetarily, that's what I'm going to cut because it's not necessarily the plot, the storyline at all. It's very much fringe. He does get appear in a couple of the novels and one of the comics. Same type of thing. Not a big role ever. It's just more like he's on the screen talking about things. They just name him. again, to give it legitimacy. But it's a cool thing. I actually like him a lot. It's a good addition to the show. Next up, this is Steve Roller. I mentioned Mr. Chang today. We'll get to him in a minute. But Steve Roller appears only in the first 3 episodes of the series. He is played by Burt Marshall, and his job at that point was Nathan Bates' right-hand man. And after him, Nathan Bates hires Ham and Tyler to be his security guy. Ham goes rogue. Nathan Bates puts a Roller in charge of security in order to find him and eliminate him. Also puts him in charge of finding Elizabeth. Not very successful at either. Doesn't have many lines. Basically says it will be done. Never gets done. And he's retired by Mr. Chang. It's implied that Chang killed off Roller, but it's really off screen, so we really don't know what his fate is. But Mr. Chang does come in, and he basically says that Roller went quietly. Mr. Chang is just far more intimidating. He has a little more of a, I don't know, he adds a little more of a unique experience to the role. He's more eccentric, a little more mysterious. He has some threat to him. He's placed in charge basically in charge of Kyle. And he gets Kyle in to see Nathan. He appears for a lot of the episodes at this point, again, until that famous budgetary slash will end up taking him out for the most part. But he's got some good sequences throughout. He's get some good play. And this one he doesn't do a whole lot, except for, again, he just retires Roller and goes after Elizabeth and Kyle. That is the end of the character database today. And that is also the end, pretty much, of the episode. We got through it. We're done. Thank you for sticking around and going through that episode. Next week, we will go through an episode called Visitor's Choice, which just might be my favorite episode of the weekly series in some ways, because it is the closest feel to the original miniseries. The fear of the visitors is there. It's a little more scary. Now, there's not some cheesy elements to it. It's just good actions, a great action sequence at the end. So I really dig it. So I'm hoping you will too. Probably definitely one of my favorites of, like I said, my favorites of the series, the weekly series anyway, at least. But what else is going on? You can always, like I said, you can find me at Paul_Denuzio on Twitter if you want to talk to me there. I have a lot of shows that I've been debating putting on there. I know I've mentioned a couple of them. I want to do something on Sunday nights, something live on Sunday nights that I can get people to come to and stream. I know I stream now at 7 in the morning because this is when I get home from work. So there's not many people around, and I get that. The show I had mentioned before at one point called Not That Bad is something I do want to do. I've kind of put a little bit in the back burners. I can't quite figure out the format I want to do it in, so I'm kind of toying with that. I'll have to see how that develops, but I do want to do something there. I'm toying with the idea of doing an interview show. But the next show I definitely have in place will be replacing my PLD 1138, my Star Wars show. I said this before, and I'll say again, the reason why I'm cutting the Star Wars show is that it's basically there's so many Star Wars shows out there. There's so much content out there for Star Wars fans. I don't feel like I had much to offer that was any way unique enough to do so. I will bring it back at times, especially when like Mandalorian season 2 comes out. I bring it back to review those episodes, things like that. So it's not gone forever. It'll just be far more irregular. But the other thing I'm going to do on the show is, finally, if you know me, and you know me well enough, that you know that I'm a huge fan of Ed Harris. He's my favorite actor. And as part of the namesake of PLD Projects, I'm going to do a project. The reason why I named the channel PLD Projects is because I organize material, medias and media watch-throughs and listens-throughs in certain organized fashions. I'll do projects for different things. It could be by year, by franchise. In this case, what I want to do is I'll do filmographies. I do whole filmographies of actors and directors, and I want to start with my favorite actor of all time. So we'll be bringing up the Harris stunts. I will go through almost all of the. We'll get into exactly. I'll give an interview video or overview video first, showcase exactly how I'm going to handle that. But all the films starring Ed Harris and his roles in them, and what they were, what they could have been, what they didn't. Maybe different thoughts on reviews of them, and we'll talk about it. Hopefully, I'll make you love Ed Harris as much as I do. Probably not. It's going to be hard for you guys to do that, but we'll see what happens. But we will also, again, continue that. It's not just Ed Harris. Eventually, I'm going to start doing everything else. I'll do this to Steven Spielberg, the Fincher Fest, David Fincher. It's all depending on what I want to do, but that's the plan for that in place. So that's going to come hopefully either next weekend or the weekend after. I'm going to do a thumbnail. I'm going to I have my basic format done. I just want to tinker with it a little bit more. But then besides that, of course, you can find me on the Action Industries YouTube channel called Class Action, the show I do with my boy Richard Eric Jarvie, where we put up two opponents against each other, and they do battle with 5 custom-made categories, and we see who comes out the winner. And also, if you do the movie Trivia Schmodown, is a thing I like to be a part of, and I help lead a podcast called Call to Action, where we discuss everything about the Schmodown. We have some great shows there. I'm personally heavily involved with a show called Chilled Action, where me and Danielle Ramirez interview Schmodown pros and the like, also other behind the scenes people as well, things of that nature. We have other shows as well on the channel. You should check it out. It's a lot of fun. But I guess that's all I have to say for today. Again, thanks for popping by. Thanks for hitting that like, that subscribe button. Let me know in the comments what you think. Let me know if there's other franchise you want me to go through, anything else you want me to talk about. What you'd be interested in seeing from me. Do you want me to do some kind of news show where I discuss the news, and some kind of interview show where I have interviews? I don't know. I have no idea. It's still up in the air. I'm doing a lot of different things, but I want to make content for everybody. But that's it for now. Thank you again, once again, for stopping by. Appreciate you. Salute you guys, and I will see you next time, my friends. Next time.